Okay, quick disclaimer before the video goes on, I am using the test run Albedo. I don't have an Albedo myself, I don't want the character. So all the information and stats and all that I'm pulling from is from the test run. So take that in mind when you assess if you like the video or not. But with that said, let's get on with it. 2.3 and Mr. Albedo is back. This Albedo review is a bit kind of late to the party on this one, but we're here nevertheless to talk about Albedo. And this review is actually going to be kind of talking about how he's gotten a lot better with the release of a few more things in the game right now, and why he actually might be a really good character to get if you just want a very cool looking character, potentially high damage, and Geo, which is, you know, overall a very good element if you get double Geo on your team. And Albedo obviously could get higher and higher potential as Goro comes out, but that is needs to be wait to seen because, well, Goro's not out yet. In this video, we're pretty much going to be talking about everything: his best weapons, his best talents to funnel into, his best artifacts, best artifact priority stats, stat priority, all that good stuff, everything you need to talk about Albedo, going over all his abilities and how they work fundamentally, and just kind of the basic rundown of his rotation that you might do. Now, obviously taking into consideration, I don't have the character and I don't really know the most optimum min-maxing ways to play him, but just from first impressions, first everything, just simple how to play him is going to be covered in this video. So buckle down, get some popcorn, and let's have a look at Mr. Albedo here. Starting off, let's have a look at his elemental skill. Now, this is a long one, but fundamentally what he does is he places down an AoE area field that you can target, much like the Geo Traveler's elemental skill, where you can hold it to place it down more specifically, or you can just press it to deal a bit of Geo damage and summon the elevator and Geo field. Now, what this Geo field does specifically is every 2 seconds when you hit an enemy with an attack, you will deal an extra hit of Geo damage, essentially just giving you a consistent outing of Geo damage regardless of which character you're using. So you can switch onto Albedo, use his elemental skill, and then switch to another character, and the Geo damage will still be proccing, which is extremely useful. The Geo damage does scale off of his defense, so he's a defense scaling character. All of his abilities, I'm pretty sure, scale off of defense, and that is why he'll probably synergize very well with Goro. And then, as I mentioned, yeah, when a character is located at the locus of the solar isotoma, whatever it's called, the elevator will lift you up. It's quite simple, quite straightforward. Now, going on to his elemental burst, Albedo pretty much just deals a massive amount of AoE Geo damage in front of him, and as well, if a solar isotama is created by Albedo himself is on the field, 7 fatal blooms will be generated in the solar isotama field, bursting violently into bloom and dealing AoE Geo damage. So essentially, you want to use his elemental burst whilst he has his elemental skill up, so you can get the massive amount of Geo damage bursting all over the whole arena. This is a pretty satisfying skill to use, I will say that. I don't know if he'll do extreme amounts of damage, or if it is one of the better Geo damage abilities out there. I don't believe it is, but it is a very satisfying ability to use because it looks very nice and it feels very good to press. And when he does the ability, it just feels very smooth at the same time. So visually and kind of gameplay wise, it is a very nice ability to use. I will give him that. And before we move on to the passive talents, I just want to mention that his normal attack pattern, Albedo's normal attack pattern, is absolutely phenomenal. There is something about the fluidity of it and just the kind of nice nature and nice kind of visual appealing part of it that makes it really satisfying to use. I don't really know if that's noteworthy, but it's a super satisfying attack pattern and I really enjoy it. Now, going on to his first passive talent, Transient Blossoms generated from his elemental skill, which is Abiogenesis, Solar Isotomata, whatever, tomato, deal 25% more damage to opponents whose HP is below 50%. So the Geo damage hit that you do from your elemental skill just does 25% more damage to enemies below 50%, so it's just a damage boost. That's 10 out of 10, amazing. Going on to his second passive, using your elemental burst or rite of progeniture tectonic tide, god, I don't know how to say these things, but using his elemental burst increases his elemental mastery of nearby party members by 125. Now, I assume that just means your party members, not nearby. I don't think you need to be in a party with a friend. I just think it increases everyone's elemental mastery by 125 flat. And his last passive here is just when he crafts weapon essential material, he has a 10% chance to receive double the product, 10 out of 10, pretty much the same as Eula's. Now, out of his elemental skill, his auto attack, and his burst, what would you want to level up? That is a good question. I would recommend his elemental skill. It's the thing that's going to give you the most consistent damage overall, seeing as you place it down, you have it up permanently, essentially, because its duration is much longer than its cooldown. And because every 2 seconds you get that Geo hit. If you buff that up a lot, you'll be able to get a lot of value out of his just elemental skill. So the hierarchy, I would say, is elemental skill first, elemental burst, and then his normal attack. But obviously, if you're going for the one-hit wonder build, then elemental burst, elemental skill, normal attack. Normal attack is always going to be the last one because, well, he's not a normal attack Andy, he's not a Hu Tiao, he's nothing like that. He's just a elemental skill burster. So whichever gameplay you prefer or whichever style you want, go for one of those, elemental skill or burst, either one works. Okay, now moving on to his constellations, let's start off with C1 here, and this is a pretty good one in my honest opinion. So transient blossoms generated by Albedo's elemental skill, Solar Isotama, regenerate 1.2 energy for Albedo. Very good, it's 1.2 energy every 2 seconds, not bad, so you really can't complain, it's just energy recharge. Going on to his C2, this is a bit of a mouthful, but I'll try to summarize it. Essentially, whenever you hit an enemy with your transient blossoms from your elemental skill, you'll gain a stack of Fatal Reckoning. You can gain a total of 4 stacks of Fatal Reckoning, and then when you consume your elemental burst, you consume all 4 of those stacks to increase the 7 exploding crystals and your actual elemental burst damage by 120% of Albedo's defense. If you consume 4 stacks, that's 30% per stack. Overall, this is a really good constellation in my opinion. It's a massive damage boost of 120%, ideally 120% of Albedo's defense in damage for your elemental burst. And I don't see why you wouldn't really want this one. Overall positive. Now, going on to his C4, this is a heavily support constellation. And if you do get this one, well, it's going to be very situational if you do use it. Active party members within the elemental skill, Solar Isotama, field have their plunging attack damage increased by 30%. A very, very support heavy constellation. Can't recommend going for this one unless you have a Zhao that you might want to combo with Albedo. I don't find using his elevator to be the most intuitive experience because you have to stand on it for maybe about half a second to a second for it to activate. And then there's about half a second of travel time, and then you have to jump off. So you could use this as a damage thing, but I only really recommend it by comboing it with characters that utilize plunging attacks like Zhao. Overall, not the best constellation I've ever seen. Okay, now C6 is a pretty good one. Active party members within the Solar Isotama field, elemental skill field, who are protected by a shield created specifically by the crystallized reaction, which is, for those who don't know, Geo and any of the 3 actual elements, Hydro, Pyro, or Cryo. They have their damage increased by 17%. Really good constellation in my opinion. Obviously it is C6, so it is a bit underwhelming, I will admit that, because it is a constellation 6. You need a lot of money to get to this point. For 17% damage only is quite underwhelming. Maybe 20, 25 would have been good, but whatever. How to get the actual buff is really simple. You just need a crystallized reaction, which is Geo and any other element. And they also have to be in the Solar Isotama field, which generally if you have Albedo on your team, you're probably maintaining consistently and always refreshing it. So really good constellation, though a bit underwhelming that it is only 17% in my honest opinion. Now, going on to Albedo's best in slot weapon for free-to-play players, it's currently the Cinnabar Spindle that you can get from the Snowstorm, Shadows and Mist, whatever, the new Dragonspine event. You can get the Cinnabar Spindle, which is his best in slot free-to-play weapon. I highly recommend everyone who wants Albedo to just go get the weapon, or even if you don't want Albedo, just go get the weapon just in case you get him and then you want to build him, just in case. Everything is just in case. But this is his best free-to-play weapon, and as for his best 5-star weapon, there's not really, I'd say, a best in slot, but these ones here are all good. They all know what to do. They all deal damage. There's no defense-specific 5-star weapon yet, so we're still waiting on that. And as for the other 4-star weapons, these ones here are just other good alternatives that you can use if you don't have the Cinnabar Spindle. If you're watching this in the past or in the future, however you're doing that really. If you're watching in the past, that's kind of weird, but yeah, if you're watching this in the future and you don't have the Cinnabar Spindle, sadly, these are some good alternatives for 4-star. Now, the reason why the Cinnabar Spindle is pretty much the best thing you can get on him, it's the only defense sword in the game right now, and as you know, he scales ridiculously with defense. Everything he does is scaled off of defense, essentially. Everything that you really want from him is scaled off of defense, and this gives you 62.9% defense at level 80 with 401 attack, so that defense is going to go even higher at level 90. And the refinement is elemental skill damage is increased by 40% of defense. you can get this weapon guaranteed to Refinement 5 if you just do the event, simple as that. So if you do manage to get an Albedo and then you also get this weapon, you'll be doing some pretty chunky damage with his elemental skill, transient blossoms, absolutely amazing geo damage right there. And so that is his best in slot weapon without a shadow of a doubt, the Cinnabar Spindle. Now going on to artifacts, this is quite an interesting one in my honest opinion. I wasn't actually expecting this to work well on Albedo, but Husk of Opulent Dreams is essentially his best in slot. The newly released artifact that is coming out for Arataki's release, as well as Goro's, the Husk of Opulent Dreams is the best in slot for Albedo, mainly because at the time when I assumed that, I didn't know Albedo scaled off of defense, but now I do, and this is the best. So the 2 set is 30% defense, and then the 4 set is essentially when you deal a geo damage attack, you gain 1 stack of, what's it called, Curiosity. And then each stack of Curiosity gives you 6% defense and 6% geo damage, up to 4 stacks in total, giving you 24% of both defense and geo damage bonus. And now there's a big reason why this is extremely good in Albedo. I don't know if it'll be great on Arataki, I don't know if it's great on Noelle, but there's one reason why it's extremely prominent on Albedo is that his uptime for it is 100%. He's one of the few characters, I think, out of the geo pool that it works well with, because of the stats that it gives, as well that he can have almost 100%, well actually no, not almost, can have 100% uptime on it due to his elemental skill. His elemental skill procs every 2 seconds, this has a 6-second drop-off timer, so you pretty much have 4 seconds to refresh one of these stats. Amazing. Now in terms of what stat-specific pieces you want, it's just defense really, I'd say. I'm not a genius, but crit damage obviously on the helmet if you've got enough crit rate, a geo damage bonus on the chalice, and then defense on the timepiece, and then just defense funneling through the substats. That is pretty much, that's the general stat priority for most of these characters, is you still want crit rate and crit damage to be the main stats, but you want defense or their stat that they scale off of to be a close behind. So stat priority would go something like crit rate until about 60 to 70%, and then funnel into crit damage defense, and you should be good to go with Albedo. Now let's say you don't want to farm Husk of Opulent Dreams like myself because you don't like the domain enemies, or let's say you just don't have any current good Husk of Opulent Dreams. What are some good alternative artifacts? You can use something like 2 set Archaic Petra with 2 set Noblesse Obliged. That probably works and will work really well. Obviously you can do 2 set Shimenawas, 2 set Gladiators, that works well as well. 2 set Archaic with any of the 18% ones. You probably could try 4 set Shimenawas, that is works quite well with Albedo elemental skill into just normal attacking. I don't see why that wouldn't work. And that's pretty much it. Those are the only ones I would recommend, but Husk of Opulent Dreams is his best in slot right now, so farm that one if you want the best of the best. Now going on to playstyle and rotation, I'm not an expert on Albedo, let me be real. I'm just covering the character, giving you guys the details on what I think is best for him. But in terms of playstyle, for me what it looks like is you want to obviously always have his elemental skill up, regardless of what playstyle you're going for, if it's main DPS or sub DPS support. You always want to have his elemental skill up because it's just damage. Now if you're going for main DPS, then obviously you want to support him with all your other characters. If you have Ben and all that, you want to use it in sync with his elemental burst, and then go into using him with his normal attacks, just doing damage. Which is kind of a straightforward playstyle, nothing too extravagant there. But if you do want to use him as an elemental burst / skill support DPS, then it's going to be the classic situation of swapping in and out, keeping his elemental skill up, and then as soon as his heavy bursts up, you just pop in with him, use his elemental burst, and then you pop out. You don't want too much field time with him. Do bear in mind that that build also does work with the Husk of Opulent Dream set, because of the off-field gain of those Curiosity stacks. So even if you want to use him as an off-field support, 9 times out of 10, I'd say Husk of Opulent Dreams will be your best bet, but obviously Noblesse Obliged, or maybe even 4 set Noblesse Obliged, if you don't have a built Bennett with Noblesse Obliged, that could also work here. But yeah, that is the kind of general playstyle that I'm getting from this, is that main DPS is pretty straightforward of just using his stuff and then everyone else is supporting him, and then he himself just turns into an alt battery, using his elemental burst on cooldown to deal damage whenever it's up as a sub DPS. And that's pretty much everything to do with Albedo. And let me be honest, he has gotten pretty much 2 times, 10 times, 200 times better since his initial launch in 1.1, I believe it was. He's gotten a best in slot weapon, he's got best in slot artifacts now. because at the time of his release, he was really bad and just had no kind of reason to be there because he wasn't bringing anything unique to the table, and he wasn't scaling extremely high because he didn't have things funneled into him because he had nothing to rely on apart from just defense on artifacts, be them mediocre artifacts at that. But now, yeah, I highly recommend, if you enjoy the aesthetic of the character, if you enjoy Albedo's appearance and everything, I highly recommend you get him because he now has potential to be a monster of a character. Nothing like Eula or Hu Tiao, nothing along those lines, but a lot stronger than he was in pretty much all previous instances. He is a monster DPS now, a monster support, and just a monster of a looking character. Highly recommended if you like the character, but that's about it. And that wraps up this character overview. If you guys enjoyed the video, like it, and also subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell to stay notified of when I upload, and make sure to stay hydrated on these hot days in Australia, and if you're anywhere else, make sure to drink some water as well. Have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.